So everybody, thanks for joining the July 28th Security Working Group for ROS 2. Looks like we have kind of a light agenda, which is kind of great. Ruffin, this is all you about enclave permission size limitations with secure DDS.
Okay. So in the ticket I list, it's just been sort of a draft PR of me going through our old Turtlebot 3 demo that we had for the ROS 2 security workshop at the last ROSCon. So I was just revisiting that and then sort of updating it to Foxy release. So me and Mikhail have just been kind of bouncing through some of the changes to the entire demo. And towards the end, we get to the point where we like sort of updated the entire policy based on the using the auto generation tool to survey the ROS 2 graph of the navigation stack to get sort of a comprehensive minimal spanning policy. And we just sort of cleaned that up using the macros we have available in the sort of the policy imports, and use sort of a single enclave just to get it working. And one of the difficulties we had is we weren't quite sure why nothing was connecting or starting. Things, I don't think the demo worked on connects because maybe there's just so many nodes, maybe exceeded one of their conventional DDS limits or from the implementation, but we knew fast RTPS worked in the previous release. So we were kind of baffled or stumbled on that until I don't know, I looked at the massive amount of STD out a little bit closer and found, at least with RTI, RTI was reporting some errors on the RTI security helper verify cert. And so that's one of the functions that verifies the remote, the other participants' certificate is valid. And it was unable to get that certificate. And so that's like kind of a scene like maybe it's dropping or something like that. Then if we also look at the built-in security topic, the on-channel write event was suffering from, this buffer is too small. And from the RTI documentation, that kind of that leads to maybe the issue that for your QoS, you set the buffer too small or too conservative. So you can enlarge that, but it turns out that doesn't affect the limitation for the built-in topics. And so if we look at the signed permissions file, that is eventually a property that goes into the DDS handshake packet. We find that it's bigger than the maximum size of a UDP packet, so there's no way it's going to fit. So that would require fragmentation. But as I mentioned before, built-in DDS topics do not support fragmentation, at least for this particular implementation. Either maybe both fast RTPS and RTI. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Hey, we have some DDS experts.
Yes. You have me, Jaime, and also Ika, that was helping me with this issue. And we brought the conclusions in the agenda.
Yeah,
so maybe Ika can explain a little bit better what is the problem.
Sure. The problem is not precisely, at least in the fast DDS case, we do support fragmentation on built-in topics. The problem is not that we are exceeding the UDP limit; it's that we are exceeding the limit for the RTPS parameters, which are defined to have at most 64 kilobytes. So in this case, the issue is that the RTPS specification itself does not support for this data to be larger than those 64 kilobytes. We did indeed find a problem with our implementation that we are not checking that size, and that's why you didn't find any error being issued. But nevertheless, the example is not going to work in any case. We are going to correct that. We are going to start checking the length for the parameters. But at this moment, we have no way of fitting such a large file, permission file, on the parameters. What we can do is either keep with the separating the permissions for each of the participants, or there is a way of trying to reduce the size of this file using wildcards, so that different topics can, if they share the same permissions, let's say, we could just try to use using wildcards, assign the same permissions to these topics, and thus reduce the size of the file. Also, having a kind of default permissions is possible using the asterisk, the complete wildcard as the default permissions for the whole system. But that's at this moment as far as we can go.
Okay, so I think it's justifiable and understandable why the size restriction is there, because you definitely want to establish the handshake quickly, and having to sort the out of order UD packets of a single handshake is probably just exacerbates the latency. For the size restriction, it's the sum of the properties, right, that can't add up to 64K. So like the X509 certificate plus the signed permissions file, that summation has to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, you're right that one way we can shortcut this is to leverage more expressive aliases or so the POSIX rule formulation that the DBS security supports. That's one thing. Like I see, or I showed in my second to last comment on the PR, was kind of comparing it to sort of an administration example where you just star for all topics and all services, and obviously that leads to a much smaller permission file. I think this is sort of on sort of the resolution is sort of on the SROS2 team, because yeah, we'll have to we do have a method of affording smaller enclaves, in that you can move your permission profiles for SROS nodes into separate enclaves, so that they get generated into separate artifacts. It's just that we don't exactly have a straightforward means in the ROS launch to point the processes to their specific. We have like right now an environment variable that says to manually override what enclave, but there used to be a means where we use the ROS node namespace to have the node look up its own enclave. So it's relatively straightforward to disperse the permissions into multiple artifacts. So we're just kind of getting that back up. So this issue is really more like a motivation of what we need to get back to.
So so even with node composition, then you're saying that each node will need to load its own permission docs, just as a side effect of we can't have one that's too large.
If you start if you use a composable nodes and it's one process and you just start having so many DDS topics, that might start getting the issue.
Yeah.
Though I think one thing you could probably do with the composable node is you throw the composable node in its own namespace, like you push it down into like foo or something, and then you just give the enclave that's given to that process access to all foo or something. That might be a readable workaround. It's still like minimal spanning for its own node, and you just have to add the permissions that are outside foo manually or something.
Will this require RCL change? Sorry, Mikhail.
Oh, no, sorry, latency. Yeah, well, how would that work in practice? Because like they're still like, it's still a single participant. So like you need to load a single permission file for all the composable nodes that are loaded in that process that has one participant.
Yeah, that's true. By the end of this, it needs to be just one document, doesn't it?
For a composable node. So this might be a restriction on how verbose and how many permissions you can have for this monolithic composable node.
How limiting is that, Ruffin? Like, is this really going to be a problem?
I think right now we have the entire nav stack, simulation, SLAM, some teleop. It's a pretty big, extensive enclave. I think what really hammers it is that for every node, it has its own private like services for the parameters, and then those kind of multiply in two. So like there's this combinatorial that's kind of coming into play, that there's really not that many topics or permissions in the root enclave. It's just that what everything expands to based on how actions and service multiplex into several different DDS topics kind of exasperates everything.
It all kind of explodes.
When you add lots and lots of nodes, even each node, even if only one node is only using like one topic like clock, it expands to like a floor of 8 topics or something.
Would that be a place where we could have a different default? Like if we had
we could probably change the alias for maybe so maybe if we customize the imports for a node, so maybe instead of being explicit on the private parameters for a node, we just do the node's namespace parameters star, and so then all those we reduce that by 6, and so for every node we take off, replace six permissions with 1 or something.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's what I had in mind as well. Is just like as long as it's under your node's private namespace, you would assume that node should have access to it. And so at that point, you can even put that wider, because as we said, like the parameters are an issue, but also lifecycle nodes. Lifecycle nodes also expose a bunch of other interfaces. And so for a single lifecycle node that publishes to a single topic, you end up with like around 10 topics and like rules. So we could just say that everything that's under a private namespace is allowed for that node. It's a bit of a stretch, but maybe not that much.
Well, and if we're really going to hit this, we got to do something, right? We can't change we can't change DDS that easily.
Well, I think there is another thing about this, is like we're kind of like mixing the fact that like everything should be dynamic and generating static permissions, which in general is like, it's not exactly the same approach. And I think it's also fair to say that if someone composes a launch file or a process that has all the navigation stack in it or anything, it may be fair to say that that person should put that in a navigation namespace, and everything under that is allowed for that process because it's kind of dedicated to that process. And then you have one rule.
That's what I meant. Like, if you have a super big composable node, you just throw the whole composition into its own namespace, and then you could allocate that one permission for that read and write action services, whatever, for that namespace. But that reduces the granularity in terms of, like, I don't know if that was a concern or an audit criteria for you.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that. Hey, Jaime, do you know anything about the access control listener?
Ooh.
Is there a way to specify permissions in pieces, or does it always need to be a full document?
I'm looking at DDS section 8.4.2.10, access control listener. I'm kind of curious about that as well.
Theoretically, it's possible to have different permissions archives and send them each one on a different parameter. What I'm not so sure is how complete that that archive must be. I mean, obviously you just cannot just cut the content anywhere and send that through. So I'm not really sure how they can be divided.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking if you could have separate permissions documents that are signed, so you could verify they're coming from the right place. Can you like add them together? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sounds like a stretch.
Oh, what's the expected mechanic thus far? Like, I was thinking it's just a different way of updating the permission credentials for a node that's already had handshake with other participants. So like, it's sort of a side channel. But I think it would be sort of an all or nothing. Like, you replace, you don't.
It's a replacement, not an addition. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't concatenate all your signed permission files. I think it's just like, use this one instead now, something like that.
In which case, the same limit would apply. Yeah.
So maybe that's all I have on this topic. Are there any other topics we want to go back to, or now that we have some DDS experts on the channel?
That was today's only topic, which is cool because we had a lot of time to discuss it. If there's no other topics that people,
I do have, and now that we have some DDS experts, if you guys don't mind, I would like to talk just more about the access control listener, actually, but not for. I don't think it's a solution to this problem, but I do think it will be really helpful for the dynamic behaviors of ROS. So
like when you're saying, like, when a node goes to add a new subscriber or something, and realize it has insufficient permissions, then does like a callback to the permission or key server or something like that, gets the new certificates, and then
it could. That's a little more complex than I was thinking. The simpler case would be like a node container wanting to load a new node, and then that container can say, "Hey, I need the IDL for this node."
Oh.
And then it can concatenate it with the rest and then update its own. You see what I'm saying?
I mean, you still have to get it re-signed.
Yeah, that's true. Some governing body could be doing this. But my question is that even possible given that, like, I only just heard about this thing yesterday. So my question for the DDS folks is, let's say I have a set of nodes running into container with a set of permissions. Is it possible using that interface to, if I load a new node, change the permissions that participant is using on the fly without having to tear down that participant? Do I understand that correctly?
I do understand what you mean. I really don't know the answer.
Yes, me neither. We have to
Yeah,
take a moment to see the implementation and the specification again to answer you.
If you wouldn't mind getting back to me, I think that could unlock some really interesting capabilities, because that's been sort of the dynamic nature of ROS has sort of hit the static wall of DDS in a number of ways, and that might unlock some really cool things.
okay, we can look at it and just share our findings.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, Joe, that's all I had.
Unmute button. Okay. We can go back through some other outstanding things unless other folks had topics. I know there's a lot of people on this call, and we've got some.
Hey,
got some time.
Joe, we're open. Yeah, just a quick question. Did we get any action items out of that? Are we going to? I mean, do we actually want to, put a task out there to make sure that we potentially try to improve or optimize the policy files based on parameters and lifecycle nodes or something along those lines? Is there work to be done?
I think maybe wildcarding the private namespace stuff. Ruffin, Mikhail, what do you guys think?
Yeah, so me and Mikhail can kind of experiment in like how much we can kind of shave off the base load of the permissions by playing around with wildcards. And then, maybe we'll send a PR upstream into SROS2 to change the ones that are like in the test folder as a reference.
I like the sound of that. We could discuss it in the meeting in 2 weeks too, if you have a chance to get to it by then. I'm not sure what's on your plate.
It would be though nice. Like this is something we kind of bounced around a lot in the design doc. Is like actually how to use enclaves in launch. It'd be nice to get that sort of resolved. It's been a while. Did we have any conclusion from that?
I don't remember.
Mikhail?
No, we didn't really have one. Basically, when the folks that worked on launch basically said, oh, we'll table it for later because launch doesn't allow many things today and needs to be refactored. And so maybe that will happen. I know like Roger is on the call and apparently is pushing for these kind of things to happen. But I don't think anyone got back to us on that yet. And maybe with the discussions about how to refactor launch, we could like try to be closer to these discussions and see what's in it for us and what points we can make to make sure that it's going to work for us in the future.
There's see, Control F launch. There's ticket on ROS2 design, ticket 272 refactoring execute process to execute an executable.
I think that's Rogers, yeah?
Yeah,
that's the one.
All right, I'll have to catch up on that ticket to get on the discussion. You think that's a point to be a point to bring it up, or maybe a separate?
I would welcome any kind of feedback on that, especially anything that'll help make the job that we're trying to get done here easier. I don't have the deepest experience with what's going on the NoDL side of things. So the work that I've done there has been specifically from where the initial issue was put in, which was we've got way too much stuff in one class here. We want that to be broken out. And we've gone through several issues through several iterations with a couple of the guys who've been giving feedback. Haven't started any implementation, so if there's some tweaks that we can make that are going to make things work better for this is absolutely the time to get it in.
Well, I guess I'll read it before I ask you to maybe expound on more. Okay.
And we can chat more on Matrix about that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm kind of itching to get started on, diving in and making it happen technically. So if we want to change something, sooner the better.
Maybe it would be good. I mean, I think we all have to read it closer before like diving in too much into it. But I don't know if Ted is around. It seems that like he has been following the launch thing as well. It would be good if we could get like a small get together to like just catch up on what you guys have been doing on that issue and the integration of Node.js in launch to see how this all fits together and what needs or doesn't need to be changed in order to improve the security part.
Yeah, that's a good idea. How about so Ted, you're right. Ted's up to speed on it. And the rest of us can take a couple days to read up on it, and then maybe we can set up sort of an ad hoc meeting. What do you guys think?
That'd be good.
I'm all for it.
Okay, let's shout out Matrix.
Just add that as an action item.
What if there are some SROS 2 folks around? We've been trying to get the SROS 2 stuff to pass CI for a long time, and it's still like a bit stuck. So if anyone, there is a couple issues assigned to the ROS security working group user. I looked into providing a better way to parsing that than the GitHub search, but there is nothing really convenient so far. But I would love to chat with anyone interested in maintaining SROS2 to like assign some tasks and see how we can get that moving. Like a couple of things we have is, so one of them is that we have some tests that are failing sometime, but not always. And another thing I would like to look into is following up on the work Sid did to get security in Cyclone DDS, because
That's been merged now, right?
Yeah, but it's not working for us. So we need to figure out why, like basically it was working at when it was early stage development, and how we can actually integrate that and test with it. So I don't know if anyone involved in that is also interested in like following up, trying it on ROS2.
You're talking about ticket 221 on SROS 2.
That's a good question. I don't have. It just came into my mind. I actually don't have the number handy, but
I'm gonna drop it in the chat in the matrix.
Sounds good. But there is basically a pull request on system tests that was basically integrating the Cyclone DDS security in the system tests that we do for all the rest of the security, and that would be an interesting place to like re-enable the test and see what's failing.
We could also add the Cyclone to the demo. So now it's installed by default.
Has anyone actually tried Cyclone now that security's been merged?
Yeah,
I know the tests are failing, but does it work locally at all?
No, I don't think I got it to work. I mean, I had to change a couple of things in their CMake to actually get it to compile properly with all the security options we needed. I don't remember, it was like a month or two ago. I can give it another shot because it won't take me long to retry, and I can like update on the ticket saying if it works or not locally.
Oh, so those
that sounds like a Cyclone bug, yeah?
That magic is missing from the release build, you're saying?
I don't know. I don't remember exactly what it is. Like at the beginning, it was like basically a bunch of variables have been introduced to say, hey, has this been built with security or not? But this bit of CMake was not speaking to the part of the CMake that was enabling the build with security. And so I think that's fixed now. But I still had issues, but I think it was only like it was on CI. I reran the jobs on CI and not locally. So I need to try locally to see if at least I can now get participants to communicate now that change has been merged. So action item on me, I'll look it up and let you know.
Cool, and we are just now out of time. We should have more. We should have more small agenda meetings because this led to a really great discussion. Actually, maybe that's something we should think about. Maybe every few of them, we should have almost a open discussion type agenda. But thank you everybody for joining the call, and have a great rest of your day.
Later.
Thanks, everybody.
Organizing.
Thank you. Bye bye.
See you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
See you guys.